Alright, so this is how I'm making a budget burner on a budget. You look here, I've got 4 pieces of angle iron that are 9 inches each that I'm going to be taking and using to make a square tube. The reason why I have angle iron is the fact if you look at that, you'll see where I've gone ahead and scraped off the paint. Looks like that's, I don't know if the color's coming through, but it's actually painted brown. The reason for that is because this is actually bed railing that I got in my local thrift store. I picked it up as only one side of the bed railing is what they had, and it was $3. And I had a whole lot of material out of it. You know, you're talking about a good 10 feet of angle iron total that I was able to use. This is just a little bit of it that I'm using for this project. I'm going to go ahead, get these welds done, and then show you what I'm going to do next. Alright, so we've got the box put together. I've got tapes on the sides covering the outside because there are little cracks here. I'm expecting it. This is the reason why I'm using wax, because I want something solid that'll fill the cracks in, that'll break away when I go ahead and take it all apart. If you've got a tight fitting box on here, you can go ahead, coat the inside with oil. Something like WD-40 work really well for a release. Have access to the wax. That's a cheap thing for me on there, you know, since it's free used wax, it'd end up being thrown out anyways. Got some other candles that'll probably might end up needing to cut some off. Now, one thing when you drill the holes, these holes were drilled all the way through the wood on here, and so I've got tape across the back. You can just drill them in part way, that way you just stick the crayons in here, but I'm expecting to take the crayons out, or because I'm going to be using a little tool right here. It's a heat gun, so that once I get the wax in there, I can heat it up and get it to melt on there. I don't want to be doing that with crayons, because crayons of course are made out of wax and would melt. Now, you don't have a heat gun, you can also go get a blow dryer. If you're making a ribbon burner forge, you need some sort of a blower. The cheapest, easiest type of blower to find, especially when you're getting started off, is going to your local thrift store and picking one up. Typically they're not that expensive. You don't need to worry about if it's blowing hot air typically, because if you're using it for a forge, you're just going to want the cold air blown, because the cold air is more compressed, so you're actually getting more oxygen. If you're heating it up, you're expanding it, it's actually cutting down the amount of air that you're forcing in, simply because of the volume. Not enough to really make a huge difference if you end up with a hairdryer that just only blows hot air, but something to keep in mind. So, have this set up here. Taking, like I told you before, I'm going to take this wax. Now, I have this little plastic tray on top of it that I'm going to be taking and doing that. That way, if there's any spillage of the wax, if I'm not being careful enough, it'll be contained on there, on that. Remember, you always want to have something, if you're working with wax, it's plastic, it's not going to absorb it, makes cleanup a whole lot easier. So now I'm just going to pour the wax in here with one corner and then work my way around. Okay, and just exactly like I was afraid of, I was able to get one side just about covered, and that was it before I ran out of wax. So this is going to take a bit more. Like I said, I've got a candle. I'm going to go melt some more wax and then keep on working. Bring it back when I show you when I'm ready to go ahead and measure out my refractory powder prior to taking and mixing it. We'll see you in a bit. Okay, so got the box, got it coated with wax in here. Might not be able to see, but it's a little bit shinier than what it had been. Next I'm going to come across and put the crayons in each of these holes, and then we'll be getting ready to get it measured out for this. Now, my biggest issue here is I don't have my forge ready to go. Not sure when I'm going to have that. The metal that I've got for it, cut out for it, said I'm building on a budget, so I had to look for a cheap place to get my steel. So, ways I've gotten my steel for this is twofold. So I'm going to be using a bunch of angle iron. In fact, that what looks like a tube isn't actually a tube. It's 4 pieces of angle iron welded together. Now I got a bunch of angle iron for about 10 bucks at my local thrift store. A little thing called old bed frame. Now surprisingly enough, bed frame steel, pretty strong. When I was cutting in the hole in the top and attempting to do that with a high-speed hole saw drill bit that's rated for cutting steel, it dulled the blade. What that tells me is that that steel is harder than a high-speed drill bit, or the high-speed, you know, the hole saw drill bit. So that is pretty tough stuff. Additionally, when I was taking and welding on it, grinding on it, I could actually see it tempering. So you could actually see the color gradation that was occurring as the heat traveled, and you could see the blue line. In fact, you can still see on the edges where it was blued. So what happened here is I took the 4 pieces of angle iron, welded them together to make a piece of tube that's, I'll say that's about a foot long. Now, what's happened here is that those pieces of angle iron, after I'd cut them together and I'd gotten the tube in there, I cut the opposite side off to open it up. Now I had to make the end caps. Now what I had been hoping is that that piece of steel that I cut out, I'd be able to use that. It was too narrow to be able to work. So what I had to do then was take some of the steel, heat it up, and then pound it straight. So that was, you know, using a propane torch, some bricks I had to do a makeshift forge on there. So I was using a forge so that I could build my forge. I want to go over this a little bit. Now, anything I do with welding, if you don't have access to a welder, you can do with JB Weld. Now keep in mind, some of the JB Weld is rated for heat, some of it is not. Something like this, where I'm attaching an elbow that's going to have air flowing through it, keeping it cool, is going to keep it under the temperature rating of JB Weld 200, the basic classic JB Weld. Now if you're using anything, if you're having to do this somewhere where it isn't, then of course it's going to come over differently. What I've got, a cheap MIG welder picked up from Harbor Freight, works out really well. I can pick up a roll, a 1-pound roll in my local hardware store for about 12 bucks, a 2-pound roll for about 23 bucks at Harbor Freight. Works really great, a lot cheaper in the long run than JB Weld. But the welder itself is an initial investment of $100. If you're not going to be using it a whole lot, you don't plan on doing any more welding than just putting this together and building your forge, don't worry about it. If you want to get into making Damascus, get a welder. Period. Because you're going to want to be able to weld your steel together to be able to forge it. And doing that, Damascus, you can do that by hand. You know, seen it done, YouTube videos on there. It's possible to do hand forged Damascus. If you're not worried about it, don't worry about it. Welder's a very good tool though, and I would highly recommend you look into getting one at some point in time. So, welder, got a little 4-inch grinder, ground off my welds to make this smooth. I still need to come back over This is why I'm not going to be casting it yet. I need to come back over, clean this up. I ran out of welding wire, so had to go get some more and haven't had a chance to be able to finish the weldings. I need to come across here and weld here and weld here. Now these welds do not need to be pressure tight. However, and this is what I did to check it, to make sure that it wouldn't be, you know, atmospheric tight, so that normal air flowing through it wouldn't be pushing out, because I don't want an air-fuel mix leak out of this, because that can cause some serious problems. I want all the fuel coming in here and coming out here. So what I did, I poured some water in here, and I see if the water would leak out of here. It did. That means I need to go back over it with the welding. That's why, I poured water in here, water came out, so that let me know where the spots were. Wasn't under pressure. This does not need to be rated for any kind of pressure on here, because we're not putting a whole lot of pressure here, because this is all going to be coming out of these. See, all those crayons there are going to be in there. So I'm going to be doing this off camera because I'm not going to be doing this today. Not sure actually when I'm going to be able to get to this, because I've got other things I've got to do. But I'm going to fill up with the refractory before I mix it. I'm going to fill it up to the level that I want it at. Just about that level, maybe a little bit lower, because I'm going to be adding water. Then dump it out into my mixing container. Slowly add and mix the water so that I get the consistency. Now you're going to want to take and check the mixing directions for whatever castable refractory you're using. Make sure it's castable refractory. You're going to follow the manufacturer instructions for what type of a consistency you need. Also, check on the curing. I'll be going over this later after I've made it. So I'll be doing another upload of that when I'm making this, and actually test firing the burner and then building the forge to fit the burner, which is the other reason why I haven't built the forge yet. Now, I mentioned one of the places I'm getting my metal for cheap on here. I want to mention the other one. So, an access. So you got access to angle iron. You've got your local thrift store. Bed frames run $10. Really high strength steel. Typically you can get a good 16 feet plus out of them, usable angle iron steel on there. I haven't made anything out of them yet besides using it for construction on there, but I am going to try making a knife and see how that works. Now, the other place that's easy to get sheet steel, and check on this for your local area, because where I'm at, there are several steel places on here, but they don't sell cutoffs. There are several scrap yards. Scrap yards do not allow you to go in there scrounging. There's a whole bunch of liability issues, how laws are in the state that I'm in. It's just a no-go. Your area may be different. Always check that. So what I've done, check the local classifieds. I can pick up in my area very easily 55-gallon drums, and that ends up giving me a whole lot of sheet metal that I can work with. Ones I'm picking up are unlined drums. I am going to need to be taking my flat disc on there, stripping the paint off of the outside, but still I have those drums that I'm able to then go ahead and work with. The ones that I'm using actually had almond oil in them, so the insides are not corroded at all because it was not a water base, so there was nothing to rust the steel. They were painted. They're unlined oil drums though, so I don't have to worry about a liner on the inside. I just have to worry about that powder paint coating that's on the outside. So I'll be going over that. You'll see me when I'm going through and stripping that off, going over a couple safety precautions. This is one of the biggest things. Never cut corners. Alright? This is Jacob with Jacob's Forge, reminding you, the best way to stay on a budget is to stay out of the emergency room or the hospital. Use your safety gear. You have a great day. Bye. Welcome to Jacob's Forge, forging on a budget. I'm going to go over making my ribbon burner here. Seen this made in previous videos. These are things I'm going to use here in a little bit. This is the chamber for my ribbon burner. It's going to be going on here. This is the one that's made out of the bed rails. I'm using bed rails. Still plan on cutting it with a hole saw. Does not cut very easily. Had to actually cut this out with that. See, it looks really nice and pretty out here. You can get a look in there. You see that, it's pretty nasty. My welds are not that great, but I've checked and it is watertight. I don't need to check for it pressure because it's never going to have any pressure on it, because everything's going to come in, blow in through there. Now, the issue we've got to deal with is we need to know how much castable from here goes in here without mixing that up. There's, of course, always several different ways you can figure that out. First things first, so I've got to get this. Grab my putty knife over here. So, this bucket right here is going to be the one that I'm going to use for doing my mixing. But with figuring out how much to go in here, because I don't have somewhere else right now that I'm going to be putting it into, so I don't want to be making up a big old batch. I don't want to make up too much. By that same note, I also don't want to make up too little. So what I'm going to do, go ahead, mix this up here on the top a little bit. And I'm just going to take and put powder in here. I've got about as much in there as what I'm going to want filled up with the final mix. This way, I'm able to get a really good idea of what I'm going to get filled in here. Now, of course, there's going to be some ways, and I'm probably going to end up overdoing this, but on that same note, it gives me a really good idea of where I'm sitting at, and I'm not committed to anything yet here. Now, this box, of course, if you remember from the last videos, is coated with wax, has wax crayons on it. That's all going to be for helping to make it easier. Now, to make sure we've got that enough in here, push this in. That's how far it's going to be in there. Now I want to make sure that made an impression on this, and it didn't, which tells me I don't have enough in here yet. I need to cover these crayons up a bit more here. Because I want that brick going up enough into the chamber, because it's cut so that there's lips here which are there, and they're meant to be able to serve to help to hold this whole thing in place here. Now that should definitely be more than enough. Pull this out just to make sure. Okay, pull it out, see where it matches. It's up in there. I'm going to take, because it's a little bit low there, add just a little bit just to be on the safe side. Now, This castable fabric I'm using. You can do it with a pre-made wet mix if you want to. This one specifically chemically reacts with water. That's why I'm using it, because it'll end up working out better. Of course, here's my water. Using warm water. Clean bucket here. Now remember, whenever you're mixing, always follow and read the directions on the box. This one specifically says to add the water first, and because I'm not sure the exact amount, I'm just going to be taking and using the guidelines that they give for mixing it up. That being that you should get it to consistency where you can make a ball and it'll hold it. Now the one problem I run into here, because I measured out what I was doing into that, and I knew this would be an issue, is got all that dust in there. And some of it doesn't necessarily want to come out easily. Another thing to do is read the tricks on it. And this one of the tricks it tells you and gives you the idea of is going ahead and using a spray bottle when you're adding water, and you get it almost to the consistency that you need. And the reason for doing that is simple, because then you'll have it that consistency without having accidentally over added too much water. So what I'm going to do here is dip my fingers in the water so I can get just a little bit. A little bit on my fingers, put that in here, get that worked in. Now, the other thing you need to remember is that before you go to use this, you've got to make sure it's dried out. Before you go to run it at the high heat, you're going to want to make sure all this moisture is dried out. Now, this one says you should be able to make balls and it should be able to hold its shape. So, and that's where it's gotten to. What I'm doing now is just dribbling this down in here in between these crayons. I can go ahead and get this in here. Now I'm afraid that I'm might not have made up enough, which is the whole thing I was trying to avoid. I don't think I made up enough because I put it in here. Now the other thing you gotta worry about is these crayons and having any gaps in here. I'll make sure that we get this nice and level. Build it up more towards the edges so that, because I'm losing a little bit in the size department, I don't quite think I have quite enough in here. I can get some of this away from here and in there. So make sure you down here, you want this as a solid brick, but the reason why we can pull the stuff out of the middle, in fact I'm going to use these to do this here, is because we need the brick to be able to adhere to the middle piece, but remember we've got a hollow chamber that we're making here with the straws in there. I think I've got just enough here, especially with how I'm doing this, so that it'll hold them, but we don't have to have a perfect flat brick. Remember, nobody's ever going to see this, so it's not like I'm making this to look pretty for any reason. Also remember, always, always, always wear gloves whenever you're working with cement. And on that note, always read your instructions for any kind of safety precautions you may need to take, or special equipment you may need for it. Come on. Try this way here. Okay, there we go. Now, just have to follow the waiting times for this to go ahead and cure. Meantime, this needs to stay inside so that it can cure. And then we'll be ready to go through the drying process, which will be putting this out. I'll actually be using my grill, even though this is right now in the middle of the winter. Go ahead and heat it up. First thing first though, once it's set up, it's got a heat gun. I'm actually going to use that and run that through there so that you've got the hot air blowing through there, running it down. Run it through a little bit at low, then run it through at high. But for right now, we need to just let this sit and set up. See you next time. Always, thanks for watching. This is Jacob with Jacob's Forge, forging on a budget. Remember, you don't plan, you're not on a budget. Have a good day. Bye. Alright, so there we go. We've got that burner going and tuned in now. I'm running it rich right around 10 psi. The gas, which is actually not bad for Venturi. Now, the issue that I had here was actually the blow dryer that I'm using for doing the forced air in this is pushing too much air. You do see these nice blue flames that we've got coming out, fairly short. You also realize as you're hearing this, you hear me easier. This is a whole heck of a lot quieter than a Venturi forge. Now I want to show you something here, and this is the reason why I was saying I was having a problem, and this is why I've changed where the setup was. You can hear me firing up the torch, how much louder that is, just with how it's set up. So, the blow dryer I now have plugged in to a dimmer light switch. Basically, I ran an extension cord to a dimmer light switch, run that in. Now if you watch, as I turn it up, see those flames get in there, better blue on there. You may notice some of them are starting to blow out. If I take it up too high, that blows it out, and then as it dies down, see all that yellow, and it's because it's now too rich. So when I get this into the forge, it's going to be better. I'm also going to be setting this up with a lot better build. Additionally, with that, I mentioned this in the last one, I haven't got it patched yet. But if you see right here, that's the leak that's on the side, so that's what happens if you don't have enough castable to fully melt with your chamber here. And you see we're getting a good mix in there. It's just a matter of dialing it in right. We should be able to cut the gas pressure in now. To avoid, make it easier to light, I'm relighting my torch. I'm going to try cutting that back down to 10. Okay, still working good. Now whenever you're using something like a ribbon burner forge, now you can see that knocked it all out, because now I've got too much air in there for the fuel. So what I can do, and this is have to dial it in, just kill it, and then slowly bring that back up. Yeah, so the amount of pressure I've got on this is just not going to be enough. I'm going to need to run it at least 10 psi. Now I've got a better setup that I'm going to be using. I'll be going over what I'm doing with that for having the control, because I'm really not liking using this blow dryer setup on this. And that's 10 psi is not getting it to the flame. Let's take it up to 15, see if I can get it to the flame I need there. Yeah, that's not going to cut it. This is what I'm looking at doing on here. I'll be getting that in there, be mounting this. This is sitting right now in what had been going to be a forge, but I really wasn't liking it as I was building it. Other thing you're going to want to watch out for is soft fire bricks, because they just don't hold up as well. I I just wanted to make sure we could get this in here, get you guys seeing that it does work on there, but it's one of these things that's going to be a fine-tuning on here. Now, one thing to always remember when you're dealing with hoses and propane, the best thing you can do is to not leave any propane in the hose. So the first thing I'm going to do right now is I'm cutting it off at the tape. Now you see all that burned out there? Now I'm going to take that PSI gauge, I'm going to turn it back all the way off. Still leaving it open here. Now I'm shutting the actual oxygen off. Yeah, you can hear that hairdryer don't like running there. So shut that off. Several ways that you can do it. Biggest thing, you've got to get that fuel to air mix right. As I said, I've got a different setup that I'm going to be doing. I've got a better way of controlling the airflow that I'm going to be using on there. But that's the basics of it. That's the gist. So hope you guys are able to take and use this concept. Now when I go to mount it in the forge, I'm going to show you that actual build on there. But hey, the burner works. We've still got to seal this up. Now this is one thing I do want to check here. Yeah, that chamber does get hot. I was wanting to know because that'll determine what I have to use on here. Now to go over the castable, in order to cure it and to get that wax melted out of there, I took and I've got my barbecue grill set off to the side, turned it on with just one burner on high, let it sit for about 30-45 minutes, went ahead, came back, turned it up, turned another burner on to high, another 45 minutes or so. So it started off at about 200, went up to 400, and then when I turned it on for the last 45 minutes with the last one, that went up, you know, all told about 2.5 hours total that it was in there. Waited till the thing would cool down, pulled it out. I had the benefit of melting the wax, also had the benefit of just drying out the brick. Hopefully all the moisture's out of there. So hopefully when I take and turn that helium tank into a forge, it'll all work out and be great. So thank you. You guys have a great day.